Hi, welcome to our third and final episode of our The Crown series. Over the last few weeks, we've been diving into the stories of kings in the Old Testament and trying to apply their situations to us, trying to see what we can discern from their decisions or their mistakes and how we can learn and move forward ourselves. This week, we are going to dive into the story of King Josiah. And we're going to be talking about the idea of cleaning house. And what does that mean? Now, have you guys ever learned something and then you've realized that you learned it incorrectly and that you had to relearn it? Maybe it was in athletics, maybe it was in art, maybe it was in school, maybe it was in math, maybe it was in music. There's so many different things that we could be doing where we find out we've learned it wrong, and then suddenly we have to course correct. I actually was thinking about it this week. I was listening to my husband and some of his friends. They were talking because my husband recently discovered that he's actually been running wrong his entire life. He's been running in a way that has deeply hurt his back and has caused him to not only have back pain when he runs, but back pain all of the time. And what's so interesting is his friends are discovering that too, and they've been talking about how they are learning to rerun. They are relearning on how their feet are supposed to hit the pavement, how they're supposed to use their muscles, how they are supposed to stretch and prepare so that they don't experience this pain. Because you see, when they learned that they were not running the correct way, there's like a light bulb that goes on. Not only are they not running the correct way, but that incorrect way of running has been actually hurting them. It's actually been making it more difficult for them to run. So instead of continuing to run the way they always have, they're now seeking and doing the work, which is sometimes hard, to learn to run correctly. And I was thinking about that as I was looking at this teach this week because I feel like it really applies. You see, there are things that we can be doing in our life. There's things that we can be struggling with. There's things that we think we could be doing the right thing, but we find out it's wrong. Or we find out it's not healthy. Or we know it's wrong and it's not good for us. And we have the option of course correcting. We have the option of relearning the right way to do something or to keep going forward and deal with the pain or the consequence as it comes. But it matters what we choose to do in those moments, guys. And so I want us to dive into King Josiah's story as we seek to understand what it means to do a complete 180. To see when you are heading in the wrong direction and deciding to course correct. But before we can dive into King Josiah's reign, I want you to understand what he steps into. I want you to understand the state of Israel. Because you see, Josiah's granddad, his grandpa, that's the word I'm looking for. Josiah's grandpa, Manasseh, he was king. And I want us to read about how he led as king. And it's in 2 Kings 21, verses 2 through 6. And here's what it says. He did evil in the eyes of the Lord, following the detestable practices of the nations the Lord had driven out before the Israelites. He rebuilt the high places his father Hezekiah had destroyed. He also erected altars to Baal and made an Asherah pole, as Ahab, king of Israel, had done. He bowed down to all the starry hosts and worshipped them. He built altars in the temple of the Lord, of which the Lord had said, "In Jerusalem I will put my name." In the two courts of the temple of the Lord, he built altars to all the starry hosts. He sacrificed his own son in the fire, practiced divination, sought omens, and consulted mediums and spirits. He did much evil in the eyes of the Lord, arousing his anger. That's not good. He was the king of Israel, and he was clearly leading them away from God. He was taking God's temples, and he was using them to worship other gods. And then I want us to look at Josiah's dad, Amon. And here is how he led. It's in 2 Kings 21, verses 20 through 22. This is what it says. He did evil in the eyes of the Lord as his father Manasseh had done. He followed completely the ways of his father, worshiping the idols his father had worshipped and bowing down to them. He forsook the Lord, the God of his ancestors, and did not walk in obedience to him. You see, King Josiah stepped into his reign after over 60 years of going in the wrong direction. After over 60 years of Israel running away from God and forgetting him, and not only just choosing to worship different gods, but doing evil things like child sacrifice. They've really lost their way. And the thing is, Josiah wanted to correct it. Josiah wanted to do something about it. And I want us to kind of sit in that tension with him. Because you see, yes, maybe we aren't tasked with course correcting an entire nation, but at some point in our lives, guys, we are tasked with course correcting ourselves. We get to a point where we recognize we're heading in a direction that's not good. We're heading in a direction that's unhealthy. We're heading in a direction where we're choosing to do something or engage in something that not only tears ourselves down, but maybe tears others down, that causes us to be deceitful or to lie, that causes us to feel shame or anger. Maybe we didn't know it was wrong at first, or maybe we did the entire time, but at some point we get to this place where we know we either keep doing what we're doing or we have to course correct. But course correcting is scary. Course correcting is scary because it requires repentance. It requires humility. It requires acknowledging that mistakes were made and things that were done that weren't supposed to be done, or that you might have hurt someone you didn't mean to hurt, or that you might have treated yourself in ways you should never have treated yourself. And there's shame in that. We can see these moments and it can be hard to face ourselves and say, I wish I had done differently. And I'm not telling you guys that you were supposed to feel shame in these moments, but to not be defeated by that. To not be so afraid of what that shame is telling you. Because you are not less than, you have not lost your worthiness or your deservingness, I don't know the word, the fact that you deserve to be loved. But you are at a point where there's a choice that you need to make. And the route of course correcting, repentance, humility, adjusting, ownership, it can be hard. It can require difficult conversations. It can require honesty that you have not been sharing. It can require some really hard looks at yourself. And I think there's some things we can do when we get to this point, when we get to this fork in the road, that aren't helpful. Some lies that we tell ourselves that allow us to keep going down the path the wrong way. And I want us to talk through them. The first is that we tell ourselves it's not a big deal. Sometimes we are carrying something, sometimes we are dealing with something, and we tell ourselves it will go away on its own. It's not a big deal. Or we tell ourselves everyone else does it, or everyone else has this problem. It's not a big deal. But the truth is if it's something that you need to hide, if it's something that you have to keep away from people, if it's something that deteriorates your sense of self-worth, if it's something that causes you to treat others not as well, it is a big deal. If it's something that causes you to go farther and farther away from God, to feel like you can't relate to Him, to feel like you can't connect to Him, that's something that will build and build and build. It never stays small. It never stays easy to control. You would have never have gotten to the point where you're at a fork in the road if it wasn't a big deal. And it's important to remember that. The next is that you have the best perspective. Sometimes you think you know what is best for yourself. Sometimes you think you have all the answers and that nobody else understands. Nobody could understand how this is actually the best thing for you. This is actually very helpful for you. You actually need this. But a lot of times we're in denial. And a lot of times we're afraid. Or a lot of times we're missing the bigger picture and we don't understand the consequences of what we are choosing to do. And we think that the consequences are small and we may not recognize they're huge. That by choosing to engage in the path that we have chosen to go down, we are developing an unhealthy habit that will affect all aspects of our life eventually. We think we have control when maybe we don't. And it's important to understand that if you've come to the point or if you are on a path that you know is going to head into a fork in the road, maybe you need some more perspective. Maybe you need to take some time to really ask yourself, do I understand what's going on here? Do I understand the choices I'm making? And if you don't, who can you talk to about it? Who can you ask for more perspective, whether it's your pastor, whether it's your small group leader, whether it's your parents, whether it's a mentor, somebody that you can trust to help you understand a little bit better about what you may be going through, the choices you might be making. The next is that you will deal with it later. We all love to put things off, especially when it's difficult. We love to wait till the last moment, or we love to wait until there's no other choice we have. And if we are heading or down the wrong path, we are eventually going to have to own it. We are eventually going to have to admit things we don't want to admit. We're eventually going to have honest conversations we were scared to have. We're eventually going to have to look and realize that something was wrong. And we're so scared of dealing with it now that we're willing to deal with something much more difficult later. But that's not the right way to go. You're just choosing to dig yourself farther and farther and farther into something that isn't healthy, that isn't helping you. Because we're scared of the consequence of cleaning a house a little bit. We're scared of the consequence of repentance. We're scared of what it will look like to be honest, or to ask for help, or to open up, or to change direction. But it's never going to be as hard to change direction than it will be to dig yourself out of that hole if you keep digging. It's just going to get harder and harder and harder. And the final lie we tell ourselves, that there's no way that God could forgive me. There's no way that people would respect me. There's no way that my parents could trust me. There's no way that my friends would accept me. There are so many different lies that we can tell ourselves, but we tell ourselves there's no way we can be forgiven. There is no way that we can be loved. If people knew this about us, if people understood what we were struggling with, if people saw our choices, they saw the path we were on. But that's not true. Because we are loved. There are people that love us and will do anything to help you no matter what path you are on. There are a family that will protect you and help get you the help you need if that is what you truly need. But most importantly, guys, nothing can separate you from God's love. The whole point of God and the whole point of the Bible and the whole point of Jesus is to forgive us, is to love us, is to bring us to the fork in the road where we can choose repentance and find freedom in it. That doesn't mean it won't be difficult. That doesn't mean it won't be hard. But we can find freedom and healing and our true selves in that. That is what God is all about. That is what Jesus wants for us most. So when we tell ourselves that we could never be forgiven for something, that we could tell ourselves that God would never love us for this, you're wrong. It's not true. It's not true, and it's not a it's not a lie worth telling yourself so that you don't change things. Now, guys, those lies really can sit in our heads. They're ones that could have been taught to us by people that we listen to, whether it's our parents or our siblings or our friends. Somebody who has had influence in our life could have taught us these lies, or we could have taught us ourselves these lies. We could have taught ourselves these lies. There we go. But we shouldn't be listening to them. We shouldn't be listening to the fact that something is not a big deal. We shouldn't be listening to that we have the better perspective and people just don't understand. We shouldn't be pushing something off and saying you'll deal with it later. And we should not be telling ourselves that God could never love us for it. God could never meet us in the mess. That's not true. Here's how I want to challenge you guys today. You see, there's always something. We all have something that we are carrying on this path called life. We all have something that can weigh us down or can cause us to make decisions or can cause us to define who we are and how we live. And sometimes it's anger, sometimes it's lust, sometimes it's pride, sometimes it's selfishness, sometimes it's self-hatred, sometimes it's insecurity, sometimes it's addiction, sometimes it's trauma. There are so many different things that can set us down on the wrong path. But it's important what we do with it. Do we come to the fork in the road? Do we come to the point where we recognize this isn't healthy and I can't keep moving forward the way I am and come out of it okay? So something needs to change. Something needs to be done. And I want us to look at what Josiah does. You see, Josiah comes in as king of Israel and he sees how things have been done. He's seen the way that Israel has gone and he says, this is not good. He says no more. Something must be done. And one of the people that worked for him found a book that talked about the ways that the Israelites were supposed to live out their faith, the ways they were supposed to honor God. And Josiah was deeply distressed because he saw that the Israelites were not living up to it. And so he decided to clean house. And he didn't just decide to clean house by saying, okay, just today I'm going to make one decision to get myself on the right track. No, he went to the end of the line to make sure that Israel turned itself around. He went in and he cleaned out all the temples. He went in and he tore down all the altars. He went in and he removed all the people speaking the falsehoods of who the Israelites were supposed to worship. He went in and removed all the people of power who had led Israel astray. He went in and cleaned house. Removed every temptation, removed every voice that was hurtful, removed everything that told Israel to keep going on the path they were going, because he knew that path wasn't right. He knew that they needed to remove those things. They needed to change their tactics. They needed to change their habits. They needed to change their perspective, and they needed to refocus on God and move towards him. And I want to read what it says in 2 Kings 23:25 about Josiah. Neither before nor after Josiah was there a king like him who turned to the Lord as he did, with all his heart and with all his soul and with all his strength, in accordance with the law of Moses. What I love about those verses, guys, is it says that with all his heart, with all his soul, with all his strength, he changed directions. He ran towards God. Josiah could have seen everything that Israel had done because he grew up in it too. It's not that he was blameless, and he could have said, I am not good enough. Israel is not good enough. We're just going to keep going the way that we are going because it's not a big deal, or because I think this is the right way to go, or because we'll deal with it later, or because God could not forgive us. No, Josiah said, absolutely not. Something needs to change, and I'm willing to do the work to change it. I'm willing to do the work and turn myself and Israel towards God, no matter how difficult it is. And so what I want to challenge you guys with this week is, what is it you're carrying around that's taking you down the wrong path? That's taking you towards a fork in the road where you're going to have to decide, do you keep going or do you change course? And what is it going to take for you to change course? And refocus on God and what's healthy. Whatever that is, no matter how big or small, we have to be honest about it. It's the first step. So as you head into small groups today, I want to challenge you to know that it's never too late. Your past doesn't define your future. God is always ready to forgive and to help you move forward. You just need to be ready and willing to do what it takes to change course. So what does that look like for you today? All right, guys, you can head to small groups. Well, actually, stick for announcements, then small groups. All right, here are the announcements that we have for this week. The first and foremost is that we have Bible study this Wednesday night from 7 to 8:30 in the lobby here at Willow South Lake. So if you'd like to come learn and read through the book of Judges, please join us. The next, guys, is that Sandblast is next weekend. And what that means is that there is no impact. There's going to be no impact online and no impact on Sunday. So take the weekend off, and then we will be starting back up on August 8th. So just remember that. And then finally, August 8th, we are going to be having our next Impact Lunch, which happens right after service. Students can go out, grab lunch, come back, hang out, eat food, play some games. It's going to be fun. So we'll see you guys there. All right, those are my announcements. You can head to small group.